The opinions expressed in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Time Warner Cable.
What's your tomorrow?
We have all 7 board members present at the table. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Michelle Langenfeld for introductory remarks.
Thank you so much. Our mission, of course, is to educate every child every day to be college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed in our diverse world. And so to that end, we collectively worked very hard to define the district's continuous improvement efforts and align to the strategic directions, all of the budget priorities that we have this year, really leading to and working toward excellence for all students. You know, I think that the budget reflects some additional resources and areas that we found need for greater support. Our efforts around college, career, and community readiness, we have some individual folks that we've had really join that team collectively working together to create, I think, a very dynamic and academic and co-curricular programming so that every child has a pathway to success. We also look to improve the area around family engagement, which is one of the district priorities, really putting resources and people in place to afford the efforts to have advocacy in our schools around community partnerships and engagement of our families as well. And I think that the piece around equity and access is and will continue to be a priority in terms of ensuring that every child has educational opportunities in a very safe and welcoming school environment. And so looking at our innovative practices around technology and improving those areas, central registration, transportation, all of those variables coming into play. We had some challenges as well, obviously, with the finances that Andrew will talk about a little more in terms of the budget picture for the state of Wisconsin, where public education received 0, which created some challenges as well as we have growing needs within our student groups, English language learners and special ed. We always keep our eye on that as well and making sure that all students have the very best that they can as we work to achieve our mission. So to that end, I think the budget is the best we can do with what we know. And obviously it is a fluid and moving document that will require tweaking and movement throughout the process. And I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, if you're ready for that, Andrew Sarno, to really walk us through that process and respond to any questions the board might have.
Am I okay staying here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You're good.
Feel a little bit lost without a PowerPoint tonight, as that seems to be the trend that we've had over the last 3 weeks. So thank you for the questions. Thank you for your attention for that matter. As Dr. Langenfeld shared, I'm glad those are wonderful remarks. And the reason that we're doing this is for the kids. And I hope that the budget that's in front of us allows us to educate and improve upon our student population. One-page document that we have tonight, in the packet, I apologize, there's actually 3 documents. We have a budget change analysis. It's a single-page form. It talks about the changes, the few changes, very few, that have taken place since we met the last couple of weeks. There's as well a summary page that I brought forward, typed up as a comparison to last year. Put a lot of main stuff on one page. We won't be speaking about that tonight, but again, if you have any questions, by all means, let me know. And then the third document, just so you kind of see where stuff is coming from. These are pieces of information. They are all final at this point. It's not to say that our membership might change or something like that, because we're still finding out students that we're educating that might belong to a different school district, or for that matter, a different school district is educating a student that belongs to us. Oddly enough, that happens throughout the year. But information that we have at this point in time, we've made some final decisions on that. That is in front of you. So again, a budget change analysis as of this evening, November 2nd, 2015. It's based on the information that was presented on October 19th at our annual budget hearing to this evening. Our state equalized aid, $39,000 decrease in that period of time. And again, what that was based on is fluctuations throughout the state as the Department of Public Instruction finalized all the districts across the state, all of that information. We got a little bit less than what we originally thought. And again, that's an equalized aid, so it doesn't surprise me that it fluctuated a little bit. And I don't want to sneeze at $40,000, but it did decrease by $40,000. That then gets put on the taxpayers since we get less money from the state. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Computer aid, and again, this is based off of property values across the state and whatnot. $13,730 extra. That's actually money that we'll be receiving from the state. So that will go against the $40,000 decrease. The last remaining amount, and I hope that this is not a surprise to you, but the property tax levy is going to be going up by about $1.4 million. And that's a result primarily of the top two offsetting numbers as well as the vouchers. So this is a direct reflection of that. This year for 2015-16, it's fully subsidized by the taxpayers of districts across the state, taxpayers across the state. Okay. Final revenues increasing by the $1.4 million, just over $1.4 million based on those three line items above. Those adjustments have been made in our financial software. Everything is accurate on that end. The expenditure changes, only one of them. This is the $1.1 million increase in the expenditures, and that's, I think there was earlier discussions of how do we account for that money. It will actually be a line item in our expenditure. It will be a payment. It's coded as a payment to another school. It just so happens that we're now making payments to the state that will then be distributed to the private schools. So that's $1.1 million. It's the only expenditure that I'm asking for a revision based on our earlier discussions. Okay. What impact does that have then? The general fund is increasing by the $1.4 million. No change in our debt service, no change in our community service fund. So our total levy then increases by $1.43 million. Earlier, we discussed a mill rate, a taxation rate of $9.99. Please keep in mind that last year it was $10.02. We thought it was going to be going down very slightly, those 3 pennies. Instead, it's going to be going up as a recommendation, 17 cents to a total of $10.16. Okay. And again, that's per $1,000 of assessed value. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Andrew, most of that 17 cents increase from October to now is again the $1.1 million in vouchers that students going to private and religious schools, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Want the public to be aware that that's why their taxes are going up.
And just to clarify, there is no, that calculation has nothing to do with how many Green Bay students may or may not be going to voucher schools. It's what we're paying, what our taxpayers are paying for kids all over the state to go to voucher schools.
These are our students that we may or may not have previously educated, but they are all our students. These are only our students living within our geography.
So there's actually been a count by that of the state, because that was, for a long time, that was a kind of an unknown thing.
Correct. There was a state account done by the state. They have not disclosed the actual number of students to us. I hope at some point they do disclose those students, but we don't know at this point.
Okay, so we're being forced to pay $1 million for kids to attend voucher schools, and the state won't even tell us how many kids that payment covers?
Correct.
Statewide, the DPI is saying that statewide, 75% of the students this year in the statewide voucher program outside Racine and Milwaukee already attend a private or religious school. So it's not students fleeing public schools, it's the state subsidizing a second educational system.
Right, but we're actually we don't even know how much the cost per student is because the state refuses to tell us how many students are involved?
That's correct. There's two different rates, and then not only that, but this could be comprised of 4-year-old kindergarten, which is at a prorated FTE. So if there was 50 4-year-old kindergarten, we might be guessing that, so there could be more than 150. That's our best estimate at this point.
So they just sent us the dollar amount?
They sent us the dollar amount. It's in a spreadsheet located on the Department of Public Instruction website.
What is it, about 7,200 for elementary students and 7,800 for secondary students, correct?
Yep.
And I think our challenge and opportunity is to really find out, if we can, how many were actually in our schools. Because the way the legislation was set up is a student could have attended K-8 in a private and then just transferred to a private high school. They didn't have to attend a public school, and then, of course, your 4-year-olds, so forth. So I think the other piece of this picture is always important to recognize is that the fact that we still are required to provide services and support for the students. Maybe you could speak a little bit about what we pay in transportation, if you have any sense of that right now, and any additional costs that a student might incur that we still would be paying for.
Yeah, thank you. I guess two important points, and I'd even add on to that. That's not to say, and we have already had some students leave a private school and come back to the public school. So that happens, and we have to oblige by that. And so they would not have been in the count. We would then be educating for the rest of the year, and that's another component is we would still be required to educate them if they chose to come back or even come to begin with. But the second thing, as Dr. Langenfeld was referring to, is there are expenses that we're incurring above and beyond just the voucher costs that will be paid to the school. Transportation is a large piece of that. Very large geographic boundaries for the private schools. We're required to transport students in this population of students would be allowed transportation. They are being allowed transportation, so that's a large piece of it. There are other expenditures, and I'm sure as we get into some of the details, even just something as simple as having added these 150 students to make sure that we're allowed to or able to communicate to them with different notifications and stuff like that. So we've added that. We've even title services and whatnot, we're required to provide services to some of the private schools for the reading, the math interventions and whatnot. So all of those types of expenses fall under the additional expenses, or for that matter, the additional levy that we're asking for this evening.
Andrea, the students who come back to us after the third Friday count from private to public, they're not included in our head count. Are they included in the private head count, and are they receiving voucher money that is not then returned to us?
Good question. I don't know. I'd only be guessing at what, and I think it's a kind of a rumor right now, how the voucher payment is going to happen to the private school for that student. So I don't know, but they would not, if a student was at the private school, came back to the public school, after the third Friday count, we would not be allowed to count them, so they would not be in our count.
Well, and historically, the money has stayed with the private schools in Milwaukee if the student leaves.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Comes back to public.
The rumor is that it's being handled on a month-to-month basis, but I don't know. I can't verify that.
Thank you.
Ms.
Okay,
Jeffries?
so that was my question, because this drives me absolutely crazy. The fact that, a student would come back to us and somehow the school receiving the voucher money would keep it. And so if you would be so kind, I would really like to know, I'd like to have an answer for that. I appreciate the fact that you said that there's kind of a rumor, like a monthly payment.
Yeah.
And when you find the information out, when you can tabulate that for us, I would really like to know that, because that is what happened in Milwaukee. I mean, it's been all over the place, and I'm only going by the news reports and some things that Mike has told us from, his legislative work, but,
Sure.
You are the numbers person. I would really like to see numbers about that, because
I will
that
get-
drives me absolutely insane.
Sure.
That if you're not educating the child, you get to keep the money? Really? The whole thing, starts off, in my mind, on a bad note because of we've talked about this so many times, about the public-private wall coming down. But then, if you're not doing it anymore and you get to keep the money, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, when you find that out, if you can give us some numbers, I would really love to
Absolutely.
see that.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Not a question, but more of a comment. As mentioned before, the state hasn't told us what the numbers are, who the students are. I believe that goes back not to the poor people that work professionally, but to the legislators and what they passed. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they won't tell us that information, because in terms of the voucher schools, the private and parochial schools, there's no transparency as we have in a public setting. They can pretty much do what they want behind no doors. There's no accountability to any of the public whatsoever. And that's another thing that we all have our parts that rile us. That certainly riles me, the lack of transparency in those schools. Their budgets aren't public. How they accept kids or remove kids, none of that's public. And to me, that's totally, absolutely unethical, immoral, and wrong when we're dealing with public money.
Yeah, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards has been lobbying legislators to, in any sort of accountability legislation, to make schools receiving voucher money subject to the open meetings and open records law. Because public can come here, every line item in our budget is open to public scrutiny, every employee's salary is open to public scrutiny, everything that we do is open to public scrutiny. They can come to our meetings. Try going to a meeting of a voucher school, or try asking to review their budget or their salary structure. You're not going to get that information. So that is the ultimate accountability, is the public being able to judge how private and parochial schools getting voucher money, how they spend the public's money. And you can't do that now. There's no way for the public to discern how the voucher schools are spending their money.
Andrew, I've got a question here. I'm missing something. I apologize. The final revenue is going up by 1.4. I see the 1.1 with the voucher payment, and then the difference of 26,000 approximately with the equalized state aid and computer aid, but that doesn't add up to 1.4. So what else is in that 1.4 besides the voucher payment and the difference there with equalized state aid minus computer aid?
On the revenue side?
Yeah.
Boy, I apologize. I think it's just those three line items that totals the 1.406 million. We have a negative 39,000, we have a positive 13 million, or excuse me, 13,000 and a positive one. Oh boy. There might be an error in the formula.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because shouldn't that final revenue change be the 1,091,413 plus the difference between the equalized state aid reduction and adding back the computer aid?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. I don't think they add up. I don't
Yep.
think they balance out.
Boy, I'm still showing the 1.406 million increase. Is it possible, and I don't know if this would impact anything, but in between the couple of meetings, I don't know if your question will impact your vote this evening, but is it possible we could touch bases after this meeting
Sure.
and verify?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, there's a relatively small change in computer aid and a relatively small change in equalized state aid, which causes us to have a little less revenue up top.
Correct.
Right? But doesn't change the property tax levy on the bottom, right?
Correct.
So I think is that what you're saying?
No, I'm seeing the voucher payment is 1.1 approximately, right?
Correct.
And then we've lost 40,000 in equalized state aid, but we got 13,000 or 14,000 back, so there's 26,000 there approximately. Shouldn't that 26,000 and the voucher payment equal what the revenue difference is?
So I think.
But you're closer to 1.2 rather than 1.4, and I don't have my calculator out here.
Yeah, and that's where it's been described, and I think that was the discussion that we had a few minutes ago about the additional expenditures. So we are levying for the full amount. We are allowed to levy for what our full dollar amount is per child. But the expenditures that we're going to be paying the voucher schools, or technically goes to the state and then is distributed, is less than that. So that's where the analogy of it's similar to open enrollment.
Yeah, I think we can levy 1.4 million for
Yes.
the vouchers, correct?
Yes.
I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just anticipated they would balance, but okay, I
Yeah.
understand the explanation.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else you
No,
wanted
I
to
think-
present?
no.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right, at this point, we will open it up to public comments. This is a time for members of the community to speak about just the budget. And I haven't seen any forms filled out. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak about the budget? We will be having another open forum when our regular work session starts, but this is just for the budget purpose. All right, seeing none, then I would move to adjourn this public hearing. I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, now we will move to the special board meeting. And I have opening remarks on this too. Did you want to say anything else? This is, we're going to approve the budget, adopt the budget.
You know, as we look forward, I think that we will be continuing to monitor all of the new expenditures that the district could incur with the changes in how we're working these days with the vouchers. I recall standing before the Joint Finance Committee and talking to them about trying to balance a budget when we don't know what we're dealing with, and I think that that's the opportunity that we'll be looking for to try to get clarity this next year. I think it's hopefully it'll be much clearer as we move forward. So anyway, I think I want to thank Andrew and all the work of the team. I know his office has worked tirelessly as well as the team. So thank you for your efforts on this, and looking forward to moving forward.
Thank you, guys.
All right, then I would entertain.
I move
A
that
motion.
the 2015-16 approved budget as modified be adopted.
Second.
Any other last comments? Sandy?
Jeffries?
Aye.
Dorr?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Blackout?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. Thank you all. Echo Dr. Langenfeld's remarks. Thank you for all your work and your clear presentations. I think were great at all these budget meetings that we've had. So,
Thank you, Andy.
all right. So then I would entertain a motion to adjourn the special board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, then we will move on to our regularly scheduled, or our work session. I'd like to call the work session to order. We have 7 board members present at the table. I'm joined to my left by Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our board executive assistant, Sandy Heller, multiple members of Dr. Langenfeld's cabinet, and also Louis Martinez Cruz, who's the Intercity Student Council President from East High School, and Zachary Ferraro, who's from Southwest. Hi, Zach. And I think I got everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie Maloney, who will facilitate the teaching and learning work session.
Thank you, Brenda. Don't you wish you prevailed people were first on the agenda? I saw you were running for the chairs, but no. There's order here. We have 2 discussion items. The first one is high school English language arts elective course documents.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to invite Mr. Fries and his team to the table. I'll provide a little bit of opening context and then turn it over to Mr. Fries to introduce the topic and then also the folks that will be presenting and did a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So we're bringing to you today the board report around high school English language arts elective course documents. And then also in succession, we're going to be talking about the introduction to acting course, introduction to theater production, and introduction to acting course as well. So we're going to give you a little bit of the context of that and then also explain the process and why we got to where we are. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Fries.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we bring you a somewhat combined set of reports, technically 2 separate departments and sets of documents, but they do have connections, so we appreciate the opportunity to kind of have them talk consecutively. I think that these documents and this curriculum and these requests reflect the increasing sophistication of the work that's being done by our staff members in the areas of curriculum development and implementation. The ultimate goal being to implement and ensure that we have guaranteed and viable curriculum documents, but also course options that are at least college ready, if not college level themselves, for our high school juniors and seniors. I think what you'll hear tonight is going to reflect not only the input and work of many diverse individuals from diverse backgrounds, but it also helps us build on already strong programs, making them stronger. I think what you'll hear us talk about are items that meet the needs of our customized options in our buildings, but also meet the needs and interests of our individual students across all of our high schools. Of note, I would offer that the language arts documents reflect a level of specificity for course development that includes some resource allocation requests that we did not bring forward as part of the overarching CED documents earlier, or rather last year. And Beth will now speak a little bit more about those language arts documents, including the process that was followed, and then we're happy to answer questions about that.
So over the spring and summer months and extending into this fall, teachers representing all the high schools have met to develop grade 12 course electives or options for English language arts. So following on the heels of the standards-based English language arts curriculum for 6 through 12 that acts as our continuum and that intends to develop college and career ready readers and writers, the grade 12 curriculum teams have worked diligently to renew grade 12 ELA course options that employ the Common Core 11 through 12 banded standards, and in addition to that, to offer students the opportunity to narrow the focus of their learning to very specific areas of study based on their interest and their need. For example, the grade 12 electives have been thoughtfully designed to cover things like career and college opportunities for learning, such as career communications or introduction to college literature. They've been designed to deepen the learning in reading or in writing, such as world literature or English composition, CEP. They've been designed to capture interest and interest space for students, such as sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, or media literacy or literature and performance. They've been designed to narrow specific focus on informational text or on literature, such as creative works or writing for publication. And 3 of the courses are designed to articulate to NWTC for either credit at NWTC or a universal credit transfer across UW schools. And those classes are career communications, English composition, and oral and interpersonal communications. So the ELA curriculum teams have developed in 2 stages. First, the course essential documents and the course overviews. And now the teams construct and continue to construct the course curriculum maps, the common assessments, and the selection of supporting materials. Currently, the curriculum writing teams are poised to return to their work and finalize the 3 remaining courses: career communications, literature and performance, and introduction to college literature. And we are looking forward to students being able to select these ELA course options next year.
So we would open it up for questions or comments. I do apologize. I realize that we all know Beth, but the folks watching at home may not know Beth formally. But Beth Taylor is one of our curriculum coordinators, helps out primarily with the area of language arts as well as social studies.
Brenda.
I'm really glad to see the CEP credits there, the opportunity. I know we've got a lot in tech ed and things like that, but it's nice to see this as an option. My question, you only have 12th graders being able to choose these electives. Can 11th graders take these electives while, I mean, they also obviously have to take one of those in the blue box. But if 11th graders are really interested in English language arts as a field, can they simultaneously be taking any of those 12th grade credits?
Yes, they're open to 11th and 12th grade
Okay.
students. The 11th graders would take them as electives, and the 12th grade would take them as credit for English language arts.
If, to follow up on that, if I read that chart correctly, it looks like the 10th graders can take it.
Yeah, it looks like that's in the wrong spot.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
that.
the 11th graders
But the
don't have
11th
the
graders
arrows,
could,
yeah.
and I was wondering, so do 10th graders have the option, or?
No, they would be 11th and 12th grade, so this is an error on my part. That line should be to the 11th
Oh,
grade
that's why,
box.
okay.
Okay, that's.
And I apologize for that,
Okay.
for as many times as I've looked at this flow chart.
It's okay. Any other questions or comments?
I do.
Celestine?
I have two questions, actually. The first one, I'm not there, okay, so let me go back. The first one is, it is on page 4. And so, if I read that correctly, you're saying that we are going to replace British literature in the novel with introduction to college literature. Am I reading that right?
Yep. Essentially, I guess we tried to list the closest correlation to current course offerings with, as the teams worked through, what would be the more modern iteration of it. So
I see. Okay, then that makes sense. So I don't understand what college literature is. I understand what British literature is. I understand what African literature is. I understand what postmodern literature is, or literature of Southern writers. I don't understand what college literature is. That's unclear to me.
The intention of the college literature course is for students to practice strategic thinking at a college level around a variety of different genres and subject areas. So that's why, like, British literature and novel are what would have been the prior courses to that, because some of that same literature will be used, but the point of the course is that the students will be strategically thinking at a college readiness level in that course. So the literature itself isn't the focus, it's the strategic thinking, it's the kind of practice and readiness that students are being prepared for in reading.
How wedded are you to that name?
I am not married to that name.
Okay. I think it needs an adjustment.
Ms. Jeffries, is it also then the description that doesn't add to the name, or do you get a better understanding with the description?
I get a better understanding with the description, but, you know, if I'm looking down a course, especially if you're 11th and 12th grade, you should be now getting used to looking down a course listing and looking at titles, and the title should intrigue you to read on. And so I think that needs an adjustment. What you said, what I read makes sense. College literature, I'm assuming you're talking about literature about college, like 1L or The Paper Chase, or, right?
So seeking understanding from my perspective, makes it sound like it's a genre of its own, and it doesn't. Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Instead of something like preparedness for college literacy or something like that.
College, you know, literary analysis would be better.
Would be,
yeah. I like that one. Yeah, that's good.
I jumped all over that one.
I guess that begs the question, since these are senior level courses that are not mandatory, shouldn't those standards be in some of the other courses also?
About literary analysis, you mean?
And what we're talking about in the college course. So well, free to think about. May I have a couple
No, wait, I
questions?
got one more.
Go ahead.
Hold on there.
Celestine and then Chris.
Okay, so we're down to myths, legends, and folklore. So multicultural literature, myths, legends, and folklore, world literature. I like that. I have to say though, myths, legends, and folklore is a slightly different animal from literature, right? Especially if you talk about myths and legends and how they intersect with various religious traditions. That's a slightly different animal. I mean, you can read the Bible as literature. So I'm not sure, I mean, I do like the world literature. I guess I'm feeling a little sad that myths, legends, and folklore is going away. What do you think?
And intentionally, it's really not going away. It's being incorporated into that course under broader, more conceptual headings. So when we ask the question, who are we?
Right.
We get back into myths, legends, and folklore.
What do we believe? How do we end?
Right, those kinds of questions. So the intention is to move from myths, legends, and folklore into multicultural literature and combine them together to get a picture that answers that question across time and across cultures.
So, okay, because, some male students get really excited by myths, legends, and folklore. And you can just use your imagination, right? Various things that are in our culture right now, including the Avengers. Does world literature once again, we want to suck kids in. We want to suck guys into this. Is that gonna?
I agree with you. World literature, that doesn't sound appealing to me. But the myth, legend, and folklore, that just has a name that bites so.
There's an element of classical education in there too that I'm concerned about losing out on.
And the myth, you mean going from world literature?
By dropping myths,
legends, and folklore. Yep. I mean, you in many ways, if you don't understand your Bible and your myths, legends, and folklore, it's very difficult to walk through the Louvre or any other museum with that kind of art. So,
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about what did the teachers say? What was their insights around this?
Right, and the teachers, the conversation around this course was that in the past we'd had a multicultural literature course that looked at literature uniquely for each culture instead of across cultures and using that opportunity to compare and contrast. And then we separated out myths, legends, and folklore, which is the basis for all of our cultural literature. So they really wanted to combine those things together so that students could kind of see the pathway from myths, legends, folklore, and the Bible, and all of those old rich stories to our more modern, multicultural literature, modern in the sense that they're unique to our cultures.
Were they tied to a particular title, or
they were not tied to the titles?
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Got another idea, Celestine, for that one? Came up with a good one for the first one.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, maybe Zachary has a good idea.
I mean, the way you describe world literature, like incorporating all cultures and stuff, I think we just have to somehow work into it. Because when you say learning about cultures, that doesn't really spark much intrigueness, if that's a word. We'll make it one.
Intrigue, okay, go ahead.
But I just think if we can somehow put it that it'll be more of a more fun class, and the legend, somehow work that into the description at least so that it gets more interest.
And I think myths and legends really, especially if you include one of those, maybe not folklore, but definitely myths and legends, I think that really, yeah. I have twin sons, so there you go. I know all about that. So yeah, I just think it's a name. I don't think it's what you've described. I think it's really just the name.
Yeah, we'll go back to the department chairs and grab some teachers and come back with a name. Yeah.
So my husband, he gives a lecture. Is hell empty? That intrigues people. People they want to know. Is hell empty? So yeah, I think a name matters.
Okay.
But I like what I see. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chris was next.
Names everywhere.
And as to your husband's lecture, maybe it is, but wait till I pass it.
Still alive, guys, go ahead.
Well, you caught her over there finally. In any event, the number of courses here, is this a net zero from what we have right now, or plus or minus?
It's a reduction. We had 14 elective courses or options for grade 12, and now we have 10, with the intention of running all 10 every year. Instead of having 14 that run some one year and some the other year, which means that particular 12th graders may miss out on one of the options, our intention is to run them each one of them every year.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I can appreciate your intention. I hope you monitor that for the next couple of years, and there's one out there that just isn't making it, get rid of it. I mean, I go through the trouble of having it in the course book. Hopefully they will all take and you find enough students. So those are easier said than done with scheduling. Good luck.
Ed?
First of all, I too appreciate the number of ways that kids can continue to earn credits, NWTC credits, college credits, and that's placed in there. I have a concern somewhat similar to what Ms. Jeffries was talking about with those courses when I look at fundamentals of public address and speech being abandoned. Can you talk to me about that, talk to us about that? I mean, I realize that that's been an issue with certification and finding certified teachers over the years, but those, I think those are pretty important areas and pretty rigorous coursework that we're kind of losing out on by dropping them.
Relative to fundamentals of public address, when we've looked at the enrollment, it hasn't been there. Students have not signed up for it. I can confirm the exact lack of enrollment. That isn't necessarily, you're correct.
I don't think we were offering that at every school. I guess
Yeah.
I'm thinking more in terms of speech, the discrete speech course.
And Beth, can you speak to, as you looked at the extent to which speech is incorporated into the college, because we do have to adopt the college name of the course, so NWTC doesn't offer maybe their version of, to some extent, speech would be this.
Their version of speech is this course, and then this course is a universal credit transfer, so it transfers to all the rest of the UW courses in an agreement with NWTC and meets their speech requirement. And the course is both about practicing the oral presentations and speeches, and then in addition to that, other ways that we communicate with each other, including the interpersonal aspects and like informal speaking and those kinds of things, small group work.
So is that part of the adoption process, that we have to look at their particular expectations and align that for our curriculum to make sure that our students have that credit opportunity?
That's correct. We need to use their syllabus and their course expectations when we write this course. And in addition to that, we also include the Common Core state standards alignment, so that we're meeting our expectations as well.
So for me, I think, and for others, the essence of speech as we've known it in the Green Bay School District is still part of this course that's going to be offered, entitled Oral and Interpersonal Communications.
That's correct.
Okay. I think that's going to be as much for our internal communication with our counselors as they talk about course options with our teachers that teach it, with parents, because we don't want to lose that. We don't want that to be lost in translation, if that makes sense.
Well, it seems that we would be losing it because, unless I'm wrong, I mean, speech requires a specific certification to teach it.
Thank you.
So there are some specific rigors that are in that class that aren't going to be in this. You can't take speech and include 3 or 4 other things and say you still have speech in there, can you?
Yeah, this course does not require a speech certification.
Okay.
Because multiple other things are included in the course, including the study of language arts. So it is not a straight speech course, and there are straight speech courses at UWGB and so forth. And when students go to select to meet that requirement, typically they can choose between oral and interpersonal communications and a speech course to meet that requirement at UW school. This is the course that we felt students would probably gravitate to and take, because it offered them multiple ways of looking at how we communicate with each other.
So what Mr. Dorfer's talking about, was that discussion had with the department chairs, and what was their thought on that? Because I think it's a very appropriate point.
It is, and that, and what I just described really was the conversation that we had. Part of it was that we want to run a speech course, but we don't have speech certified teachers, and students really are not apt to take that course. Oftentimes that course doesn't fill up, and then we have to abandon it. And we're trying to offer courses for students that will move them into college readiness and offer them credits that prepare them to go into any of the UW school system and offer them, and if they choose to, they can continue on. It's just we want them to have that opportunity and not choose it because it's a straight speech course, which students are afraid of.
Andrew, did you have a?
Yeah, I was debating whether it was covered enough or not, but when in doubt, I guess I'll ask it anyways. So there used to be, looking at literature courses, if the student wanted to do a narrower focus, under the current course descriptions, they had several specifications, I guess, for lack of a better word. If they wanted to take that a little bit more of a magnifying glass, they could do just British, they could do just novels, they could do just mythology, they could do the multicultural, which I presume probably had a greater deal of emphasis on non-Western European literature, or the science fiction, where now it seems, I guess I'm just trying to think through the fact that they've broadened a lot. There really isn't as much specialization anymore, and yet you did, I think it was covered in the discussion that we do want kids to be able to, I guess, specify somewhat. So not to repeat a whole lot of the other discussion, but I guess that would be nothing to the level that I would not approve it, but I guess it's on my mind.
I appreciate that. I can tell you that in the initial conversations, well over a year ago, as we talked about, desired result, current reality, we looked at enrollment numbers, we looked at the viability of some of these courses that seemed very tailored to high interest, but were not catching for some reason. We were looking over even, from the last adoption, as we went back in Infinite Campus over 3 to 4 years to see were they running or not, and because there are a lot of personal roots that a lot of our staff have, and hey, this is a course that I helped develop initially, and I really cared for this course, and will this be difficult to give up? Is it running? Is it not? And then we compared that with the expectations of the Common Core, and the standards and the documents that we brought forward last year to try to figure out how can you combine the interest-based topics with the similar common rigorous expectations, and that was part of a lot of the conversation from my perspective. Beth, I don't know if there's anything additional you would add, but that's how I've seen that conversation evolve.
I think the piece that I would add is that Common Core alignment would require for us to offer more courses that are informational text-based, which we didn't have in our old selection of courses. So the course like writing for publication, media literacy, and English composition tend towards a more informational type reading and writing. And those courses are new in a sense of taking up the allotment of students for some of the other courses that were more specific to like Brit-Lit.
And we also looked at what other school districts might be considering in this transition. I mean, we had an initial conversation briefly on, the team said, well, do we do a Language Arts 12? And it's a continued survey to some extent, like we've had with Language Arts 9, 10, or 11, and the group felt that it was important to give kids choice to customize, as they get ready for that college readiness and career readiness piece. So ultimately, I think they tried to settle on a blend, but.
So we were offering maybe more specialization than we were actually able to run anyways.
Correct. Because courses like Brit-Lit didn't run very often.
Oh, they didn't?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the good and the bad. We had a lot of offering, but then when it came down to scheduling, it was almost like kids maybe would schedule for a Brit Lit, but you only had 5 or 7 kids and you couldn't run a section, so then you're taking kids out of Brit Lit and possibly moving them into another class, expository writing or something along those lines.
Okay.
All right. Any other concerns, questions?
We got some good feedback. We appreciate the feedback. I know that both Mike and Beth will take that relative and bring it back to the teams that have worked to get it to this point. I think that that's another point of emphasis that, Mike and Beth, they don't, I know you guys know this, but they don't do this work alone. They have a team of teachers that have worked and have worked hard to get to this point, so we appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now if we can quickly go to the theater production introduction to acting course essential documents.
Sure. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Eric Kahn, who filled an open curriculum coordinator position for us at the beginning of the school year. It's his first opportunity to speak with you tonight. He brings, as a point of background, brings to us a plethora of curriculum and instructional expertise. He's got background in as a lead teacher and curriculum developer as part of one of Wisconsin's online charter schools. And he's working with a variety of curriculum areas this year, Phy-Ed and health, music, some other fine arts pieces. And tonight he's here to talk a little bit about our acting and theater courses that we have revised and are bringing forward. So, Mr. Kahn.
Thanks. Last February, the board reviewed the Fine Arts Task Force's recommendation for the development of a theater course for East High School to be offered in the 2016 to 2017 school year. As theater courses are currently being offered at West, there was an opportunity to create consistency between both East and West at the introductory theater level, from which each school can connect to their specialized programs, the International Baccalaureate program at West and the Fine Arts Institute at East. The curriculum writing team for these courses consisted of Ellie Hintz-Radu, West theater teacher, Scott Willems, East perspective teacher for these courses, and Lucinda Roberts, East's fine arts coordinator. The group worked hard in developing course documents for Introduction to Theater Production and Introduction to Acting, which introduced students to the many elements on and off stage. During the process, Beth and I were impressed by the passion that Ms. Hintz-Radu, Mr. Willems, and Ms. Roberts all brought to the process. They built from the national and state standards, using successful elements of the current theater courses, added additional depth to meet the new national standards, and developed common units and assignment expectations for students at both East and West. Their continuing work after this process will be to flesh out those common assessments for their units. And questions, comments?
Questions or comments? Celestine.
I have a question. This looks great. The one thing that you had said, common assessments for the units. So you mean common assessments between West and East High School?
Correct.
And so what does that mean given the fact that the theater is an IB course at West?
Sure. Well, there's actually the IB courses, they're separate with their own curriculum. West has been offering an introduction course for both theater and acting outside of the IB.
Got it.
And whenever possible, we seek opportunities for, this would be kind of like a singleton at East and a singleton at West, and how could we coordinate them to make sure that they have an opportunity to collaborate, as part of the process relative assessment. Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move that forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes Teaching and Learning Work Session. If I may move to reorder the agenda so that we can move up the Purveyor portion of the
second.
Of your session, Chris, so we don't hold these fine people hostage much longer.
No, that has to be a motion or just?
Yeah.
It does have to be a motion.
Yeah, it's
We have a
been
motion, it's been
Okay,
seconded.
second, fine.
All right, Sandy?
Molly?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
York?
Aye.
Jeffries?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Blackout?
Aye.
Whiteman?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
Thank you.
Now I will turn the facilitation of the organizational support work session over to Chris Wagner.
Thank you. Ms. Marsh will introduce our guest and the topic, disease management.
Thank you. I'd just like to introduce the people
from Prevea who are here to talk about chronic disease management program. We have first Jody Weiss, who is a Quality Initiatives Coordinator. Jody is right here. And Mark Hillesheim is the Director of Client Relations. Dana Carroll is the nurse practitioner who is working on in our clinic. And Kate Hogan is the Vice President of Corporate Relations and Innovation. So I think this is the first time for everybody but Mark. You've been here, but Mark has been here before. So I'll turn it over to them. They have some slides, PowerPoint slides that they have prepared for you, and everybody should have a copy of that, as well as the attachment that outlines the program, which was included in your board update materials. So I'll turn it over. Who is going to start?
I'll start. I just really want to quickly say that exactly 3 years ago today, we opened the Health and Wellness Center here at the school district. And in that time, Dana actually has seen over 9,900 people. And those services have brought over $388,000 of savings to the school district. So seeing that today is exactly the 3-year anniversary, I thought that was pretty telling. And what we really want to talk to you quickly about tonight is taking a lot of those acute care services and a lot of the employee-related services that are currently being seen there kind of to the next level. And that's a chronic disease management program that we think we can offer through the Health and Wellness Center.
Thank you for the opportunity to come. Again, my name is Jody Weiss, and I'm a registered nurse at Prevea. I've worked in the chronic disease management program for approximately 4.5 years now, and was a part of building this at the clinic from the ground up. And we find it very rewarding. We're very excited to be able to offer this to the public school district. I'm going to move on here. Okay. Very briefly, just a little bit of an overview on what the well-being program looks like. It is an overall capture of a patient's health status. We capture data through our electronic medical record, which is Epic. That is the same medical record that Dana uses when she sees patients here at the district, and it is used by all of the hospitals, St. Vincent and St. Mary's here in Green Bay, as well as many affiliates that we have, including places such as Green Bay Oncology, Bay Area Nephrology. So some of the specialty clinics in the area also use the Epic medical record. We are able to gather data from the record and kind of paint a little bit of a picture of the employees here at the district. What would happen in this program is that it is absolutely completely voluntary for any employee who maybe perhaps does have some sort of chronic disease or complex care need. And in that circumstance, Dana would be able to assist them with any additional coordination, care, instruction, education, resources that those patients might need. So what's happening right now is she sees patients on an acute basis when they have, your sore throats and those types of things. But this would be taking it, like Mark said, to the next level. She definitely would be providing education to those patients with chronic disease and helping them to take better control and be proactive in their health care. So again, Dana has access to the record. She'd be able to see what has happened with these patients throughout the Prevea system. Again, this is only for our Prevea patients that have records within Epic, and help coordinate their needs across the system. This programming would start right after the new year. Very briefly, the chronic disease management program that we do have right now is actually being utilized by 30 of your employees already. So 30 of the folks that work here currently do have care management chronic disease services through the clinic, and those services would not change. They would continue to see them through their primary care provider. What we've been able to do, and you can see in the screenshots, either in your handouts or up on the screen, is we can take information on our patients seen in the clinic, hospital, or by Dana, and actually look at what that population is like. Now, I recognize that 2,054 is not all of the employees, but it's a very large population that we can take a peek at, pull data through Epic, and look at their different chronic conditions that they have. So currently right now, those patients that we see within our record, again, 299 have hypertension, 110 diabetics, 308 with high cholesterol levels, and just over 1,000 who are considered overweight. What we do then is we look at opportunities for Dana to work with these employees and help them to take care of themselves. So example, the graph that you see on the right are patients who are at risk for prediabetes. The criteria for that is consider patients that are 45 years and older, overweight with elevated blood pressures and LDLs, and they have a higher potential for developing diabetes in the future. So what Dana can do then is work with them, set goals on an individual basis, and assist them in trying to meet their health goals, and again, prevent the diabetes from happening. So it's a very exciting opportunity that we have, more individual, high-touch communication with the employee. I often use the words employee and patient interchangeably because I'm used to working in the clinic, but very, very high-touch opportunity so that she can, again, meet their needs in addition to the acute care services that she's already providing.
So one of the things we look at is different ways that we can engage this population of people. One of the things we believe we can do is through the staff scoop, we're already providing information about the Health and Wellness Center and opportunities there, but we could use that mechanism to educate people on what this program is, what they would look for either in the current HRA data, the health risk assessment data that they may be getting, or just knowing some of these risk factors that they might have, encouraging them to go ahead and call the clinic and set up an appointment. Otherwise, Dana and the medical assistants we have, again, the current people that are going through the Health and Wellness Center, also current people that are in our Prevea record that are employees here, we could also engage those people. Potentially, maybe some incentive could be given to people that are taking the health risk assessment, that if they meet certain criteria, they would come to the Health and Wellness Center and present their data to Dana, let her educate them on them, and start helping them through some of these risk factors. There's also a couple other options where school district members could be contacted by a scheduling line that we would set up, so they could do that on a voluntary basis, or again, Dana could reach out to them as well. There may be a few things, if we go to this, that would need to be adapted to the current Health and Wellness Center. One is, right now it's set up that everybody just is a walk-in system. Knowing that these appointments would take a little bit longer, to help provide Dana with some better resources, we would set up a scheduling line for people to call and actually set up appointments for these particular times, so that they would know that they could spend 20 minutes or so, maybe even a half an hour. As the services really took off and we were able to engage more and more people, seeing that those appointments take longer times, we wouldn't really want to disrupt the current flow of the acute system, so we would maybe have to, over time, either add some additional hours towards different times of the day, or we might have to add actual more hours for another provider to be there as well. One of the things that we've also identified with Jean and the human resource area is that a lot of employment-related things are going through the Health and Wellness Center now. We don't want to interrupt that, but we could schedule some of those times differently and free up some times for the chronic disease folks to come in where that could be scheduled as well, so we can get both things in. And then we do need to work with Dana and the medical assistants on site just to learn how to mine through some of the data and to look at different risk factors and identify people that are most needing of these services and would benefit mostly from them.
With that, I invite you to ask any questions. Just to add to the comments, at this point, we don't see any additional cost to the district, so we would try to use time that's already available for the employees to come in to see Dana. Right now, we'd open it up to employees, not to their spouses or others on the plan, and see how things go. And then if we needed to add time, we would consider doing that. As was commented on, we would inform people through the staff scoop. People could also self-refer, but also Dana would be making calls to people who, through their system, she's identified at higher risk. Any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Dorf?
Now, the slide, opportunities for engagements is provide additional incentive. What are we talking about there, Jean, as far as incentives to people for utilizing this?
We haven't discussed what the incentives would be at this point. It could be something that they would receive by going through the program, but we've not identified any money attachment to this. We're hoping that this would be low cost.
If I may piggyback on Mr. Dorf's question about incentives, I personally have no problem with incentives. I just don't want to see people penalized for a situation that they might have. Mr. Becker?
I was kind of going in the same direction with that. It sounds like a good plan, but I would want to be guaranteed that this isn't going to just open the door a little bit for it to be mandatory, or for it to be worded as an incentive, but in fact to be a penalty, as we did with our current HRA. We raised all of your insurance to 17%, but we'll incentivize it back to what it really was before. So I just don't. It's a great program, and I hope a lot of people do it, but I would rather fewer people did it than this become a forced thing or intrusive. And
I could speak to that because it was they asked for ideas on how to engage people without feeling invasive, because the biggest concern was, how are we going to engage people without feeling like we're invading their privacy, looking through their chart, saying, hey, I see you're a little overweight, want to come in and see me? Because that feels very invasive. Mm-hmm. And I had said, this is the perfect time of year. The HRA results are coming in, so tell them, bring your results to me. And I just threw it out there. I hadn't considered the other side of it, that it would be maybe considered a penalty. Just more, hey, take these results and do something positive with them.
Oh, nothing you said would be interpreted by anyone as a penalty. Definitely not. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see this being upgraded to a mandatory program in 2 years. Then I would feel bad that I opened the door today.
I was going to say, I was thinking of more of an incentive, like you might get a pedometer or something that would engage you in whatever you're intending to do, like if you're starting an exercise program, something like that, rather than a penalty. Because I know some companies do that. They might give you a special cookbook or a pedometer, maybe a certificate towards some exercise clothing, sometimes a reduced amount in a gym.
Yeah, just as long as it doesn't. Again, my worry is about nothing that's in here. My worry is about this turning into something else someday. Mm-hmm. That is not voluntary or is worded as voluntary, but really is just not really.
Okay.
Do we contribute to gym memberships for our employees?
We do not. But it's something that we could look at that as well. That could be another
because
piece.
I know a lot of places have a minimum number of times you have to attend per month, and then they will pay money towards that membership. And then I do have in the spirit of Chris Wagner, I do have another question. How do you communicate your involvement with the primary care physicians?
That's the beauty of Epic. So we do have the capability. Dana and her staff can send messages via the electronic medical record to the primary care physician if that is needed. And also, because in each patient's record, you can clearly see every visit that the patient has had. So if they do see their primary care physician, the PCP can go back and see
the visit with Dana. So it's
Okay.
it's all encompassing.
But if there's a concern
Mhm.
is, rather than having the primary care physician happen upon it when they're at
Oh,
the next
certainly.
appointment, is there a direct email or some
Yes.
kind of an alert that is?
Yes, absolutely. We call them in-basket messages. So what Dana does is she basically sends a message right to the provider regarding the patient and her concerns and communicates that way through the record. So we always have proof of that within the patient's chart.
Thank you. There was a great article in the New Yorker magazine, probably 3 or 4 years ago, about a clinic near where I grew up in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Yes, always New Jersey. That took a very different approach to their chronic patients. And this approach was very didactic. It was very encouraging. It was very intensive. And so there was, I think it was set up, there was a doctor, a couple main doctors, and then there was just a bevy of nurses who were just constantly, "Hi, Mr. Johnson, I want to make sure that you're taking your insulin on time today. You know, I want to make sure you're taking your whatever today," and just very, very intensive. In the chronic disease management, they were really aiming for what were many things, but definitely diabetes. So here's my question. I certainly think that can work well, right? But the crux of what happened in that clinic in Atlantic City is dealing with a non-compliant population. And, you know, I don't know necessarily that just because we have staff members who are overweight or hypertensive, that they are necessarily non-compliant. And so that's my first question. How are you going to really work with someone who already knows most of our employees have at least a bachelor's degree. Well, many of all of our teachers have at least a bachelor's degree. We're talking about a very educated workforce. So they know what their numbers are. That's one thing. The other thing is that, diabetes is definitely chronic, takes its toll over a long period of time, et cetera, et cetera. That's the only chronic disease I see here. I mean, I see hypertension, which is a stroke risk, right? I see, and also, let's see, diabetes, high cholesterol, which is also coronary issue, right? But I'm not seeing the other chronic diseases you're looking for.
Right.
So those are my two questions.
I'll take the second one if you want to take the first one. Okay, I'll try to answer that. So as far as chronic diseases are concerned, it's very easy to grab numbers, if you will, in regards to patients' levels of, you know, your hemoglobin A1C is a level of your diabetes. It's very easy to grab those measurements. However, when we say chronic disease, it does not mean just those three. And obviously, if a patient doesn't even have a chronic disease, perhaps their concern is anxiety or depression, which is not necessarily identified as a chronic disease. It does not mean that we will not care for them within this program. So we like to say chronic disease, but it also can branch into some more complex care. So examples, asthma, COPD, occasionally we will see patients with those types of concerns, and those certainly would be within the workflow that Dana would provide. Your first question. Oh, in regards to the high touch and compliance for patients, yes, absolutely. And you're exactly right. Lots of patients, they very well do know what they need to do, and sometimes it's a little motivation. Sometimes it's a little bit of goal setting, and sometimes it's just having someone to be accountable to. So perhaps it takes one visit with Dana to just kind of get on a level field and understand where they are at and what they're looking at. Or sometimes it does require some education. There are new techniques, there are new medications perhaps that could be a positive for these patients. So everyone is on an individual basis. It'd be very hard to say one way or the other. And I guess Dana would likely have to have that communication with the patient.
Well, and I can add to that in the sense that, this is a very, very highly educated population, yes. But I think a lot of times in the physician office, sometimes things are rushed and things don't get explained. I mean, just talking about common colds and what are you taking for the symptoms that you've been having? Oh, I'm taking Benadryl. Okay, that's great. That's an allergy medication. What are you taking for the cold symptoms? And because things weren't ever educated, maybe they didn't read about it, or so I think that a lot of it can be extra education. Where if I have the half hour to sit down and talk about, okay, these are the things that your doctor never talked to you about because he's got a schedule that he's going 15 minutes, and he comes in and says, "This is your new medication. Take it 2 times a day. Come back and see me in a week or in a month." And a lot of times that education piece is missing, and that would be where I would fill in a lot, because I think that it could, even in a very highly educated population, could really help. Sometimes just distributing the written materials that there might not be given in the regular offices.
Yeah, Jean, I think I'd like to see, thank you so much, I appreciate that. I think I'd like to see, after a few months, exactly how this works in a flow chart. Flow charts are so annoying to put together, but they do actually work very well. So I'd like to see how that really works, and especially, from initial inquiry, who generates that inquiry, how that then folds back to the conversation with the physician. I have to say, here in Green Bay, I feel fortunate. My doctor spends a good amount of time with me. My son's pediatrician spends a good amount of time with them, and so, and my husband and I go to the same primary care physician. So I do feel that it's important. Although education is certainly key. We want our workforce to know what's available. So I'd like to see a flow chart about how this is going to work. I think it can work, but I think I just need to see it.
So, for example, when the initial contact is made, and then, for example, what is the nature of the illness, chronic disease,
right?
And then, for example, how many visits were there, and just information like that.
Right.
Is there an ongoing, so if we do it at a point in time, there might be some patients or employees engaged still, and others that have been seen, and then they're not going to be seen at this point anymore. So there might be some episodic things going on.
That's fine.
Seeing what we've been doing in, say, about 3 months. So if we open
3 months would be great.
So for example, if this launches in January, February, March, sometime in April, after we gather data.
That'd be perfect. Thank you.
In the process of doing more with our chronic disease management, given that we are self-funded, what, if any, efforts have we made to actually put a mathematical return on investment per dollar spent evaluation on these? Have we done any of that?
We have not done that. There are some ratios that Prevea has shared that look at that, and Jody can speak to that, but we have not done this before, and it's difficult to say whether or not we prevented that heart attack, or whether we stopped somebody from needing to go into using insulin because they were pre-diabetic. So the savings, we've not estimated what that would be. It's very, very, very difficult to predict, because we don't even know how many people will voluntarily engage in this.
Sorry. I'm just thinking in terms of the how to get people to engage. If it were presented to the primary care physicians that this service could be available, and would they recommend that their patients follow up, rather than doing cold calls from Epic?
That might be another way. Well, and the other thing is that as the employees come through the clinic, if Dana sees somebody who could benefit, she can offer it at the time. But yes, we could, would it be possible to get the word out to the primary care physicians at the clinic?
Certainly.
Because they'll see that they're, if they know that they're an employee of the school district, they could offer.
They do, absolutely. So we do have chronic disease management care managers, we call them, in every primary care office at Prevea. So our doctors are very well versed in this. However, we can make a special effort for those patients that we know are employees of the district.
Employees of the district.
Certainly, to encourage them, should they have any concerns, know that Dana is, available, as well as the staff of the primary care physician. Certainly.
Any other questions? A couple of questions and/or comments, just so I understand this correctly here. In terms of record access, that can scare a lot of people. It sounds George Orwellian. So if somebody sees you, Ms. Carroll, down there, that's when you go to their records in Prevea. You don't go to their records before they come and see you. Is that a fair statement?
At this point, no. At this point, I just open the record as they are registered and they are actually making an appointment.
Okay, so it's going to stay that way, or we're not going to be going through everyone's records looking for someone who has a problem, or what? So I understand
Can you
this.
speak to the Vital part of that?
Yep, so the way that we typically do this, and the way that I had pulled the data for the screenshots that you saw today, is we have what is called a third-party vendor. It is a group called Vital. And what they are able to do is they have a direct link to our electronic medical record for all of our patients. And what they do is they are able to pull data as we request it. So we can request, all of the Green Bay Public School District patients who have diabetes, and it will generate a list for us. It will give us a total, which is how I got the totals for those numbers. Now, obviously we have to work through details on how we'd like for these employees to be reached out to. We want this to be voluntary, so we would like them to come to us first, obviously, before we would reach out to them. Can we access them individually? We can. But that's not to say that that's necessarily how this is going to work. If we do see an opportunity to reach out, for example, we have a group that we need more education on hypertension, maybe a lunch and learn. We can do any sort of group type of visits, not necessarily calling out individuals, but saying we have this offering. If you have any interest, you can attend. So could we do it individually? We could. That's the nature of an electronic medical record.
Okay, so I'm still not real clear what we, once this is implemented, start going through records and calling people, or we do got to wait for them to self-refer?
Yeah, who's in charge of making that decision?
Well, certainly we would work with Jean and her team. We really want to try and educate everyone in the district of this service through the internal communication process. We can certainly send a blanket letter to everybody in the district talking about the program. We're really willing to do any type of communication to help get the word out and support what's going on at the on-site center. And we'll actually pick up the cost of that kind of communication. It can be a very blanketed type thing. And so it can be via the staff scoop, a letter, some other kind of communication that comes out. And we really want to, we've talked to Jean and her team at length about really trying to reach out without contacting people directly or mining the data like you're talking about, Chris.
Yeah, I guess my concern comes from personalizing for my medical information. If I release it beyond my physician or someplace I go to, be it down here, it's okay if I do it. But all of a sudden I find somebody else is going into my records looking at it. I find that problematic for myself. I don't know maybe other people don't.
Well, and Dana and all staff that are here obviously abide by the HIPAA regulations that we have at Prevea, which are very strict. So without a reason to go into the medical record, we don't go into the medical record.
But here's the thing. So I'm still not clear who makes the decision about whether or not it is a blanket letter invitation or it is a reaching into the medical record and contacting people. Who's making that decision? Purveyor or Green Bay Public Schools?
It would be our.
It would be our public schools.
All right,
Yeah.
so I mean, I have to say that I think, I'm not sure where we are in that. I would prefer,
Our goal is to blanket.
Okay.
And
That's what we'd
educate
like to
that
do.
way. That's really what we want to
Okay.
do. We want to be able to see some results. We want to measure the results. We want to bring you back some kind of data saying, X amount of people have, reached out to us. And we think through the HRA tool, and when that's going on, that's a natural engagement opportunity, those types of things.
If we do not find that, if we come back to you, when we come back to you in April, if we find that we just aren't reaching people, that, Dana is still finding that people aren't engaging in this, we'd have to look at how else do we reach out to people, and perhaps calls would be a way to do that. The data is still confidential, but I do understand your concern that if somebody who's not your primary care provider
Exactly.
is calling, then you think, how confidential is it really?
One of the things we want to do is be able to offer the school district an opportunity to build upon the success of the on-site clinic. And that's why we brought this program forward. It's also something that Jody and her team and Purveyor have been working on a greater basis for other people. And we just felt your population and the success of the clinic could benefit by kind of taking the next step to acute care and how we use the clinic. And so an opportunity to even make your population more healthy.
well, before I left city council, we had actually a nurse come to City Hall. And I can't recall, I think it was twice a month, something like that. And then essentially she was doing the classes. She was doing lots of different, like here is just general education. Now granted, there's City Hall and then a few buildings, as opposed to our 40 some odd, right, plus this building. So I get that that's kind of an issue. That is something that would be interesting to me. Like I said, in my perfect world, we would actually have nurses back in our schools, not just for our staff, but our students, but that's another day. So that is, at this point, from what I know, from what you've said, that kind of teaching is more interesting to me than reaching into records and contacting people. If they're not, like I said, when you're dealing with someone who's non-compliant, then I think there's a different model perhaps, but I'm not quite seeing that yet.
One of the things we can do with this data, as Jody pulls it and looks at the graphs that you see, we identify what the key issues are, and we can look at other things as well. We're willing to offer what we call our well-said classes. We know that your population is spread out throughout the district and a lot of buildings, so that becomes a little bit of a challenge, but we're willing to offer free of charge educational classes on those topics that rise to the top. And so that's an opportunity, and we'll do that and line up our providers, our dietitians, health coaches to do those types of things. So.
Okay, that'd be more interesting.
Just hopefully the last thing here. Just so we're clear in, I think we all appreciate what you're doing. Please accept that, despite our questions here, because I have a couple of concerns. Ms. Marsh, I think it's a pleasure of the board, before we would ever go ahead looking at records individually outside of the staff members' permission, we'd have a very thorough discussion at board level and board approval for same.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. Just as a follow-up, I just don't want to lose sight of Katie's comment, is that if there's Purveyor, I can see, that a doctor would know how will physicians in the area know that we have this opportunity, or how would we let them know? So for example, if I'm a primary care physician, but I know this opportunity is available, if I go to a Purveyor doc, do they know that? And will they know that? And then they can say, Michelle, you're kind of in that tall line of the chubby ones. Could you? No, I'm very serious. Yeah. That this is an opportunity. Every time you come in here, you tell me you're sick of being this weight. Would that be something that?
think within the Prevea Clinic system, you're able to do that. I don't know if we'd be reaching out to the other physician groups.
Because
at this
I see
point.
that as a real advantage, that,
But they actually have access to Epic as well. I mean,
Correct.
Epic connects
Well,
everybody.
they do to an extent. It is not the same version of Epic. So at Prevea, we cannot access records of any Bellin patients. We cannot access anyone's records unless they have been seen at Prevea or the St. Mary's or St. Vincent hospitals or our affiliates. So, but there is a functionality. It's called Care Everywhere, where if you are a Bellin patient and you wanted for your records and your information to be released because you are seeing Dana, that can happen with your permission. That Bellin could share their Epic record of yours with Dana.
So then you would extend your reach out to primary care to the other.
Well, only on an
providers of it.
individual basis for particular patients
Right.
if we have their permission and they request it.
So our employees can know that if they see a physician outside of the Prevea Clinic, they can refer to us if they just even bring in their personal health assessment record and say, I'd like to go through that, they could do that as well. So it would be self-referrals from those outside of the Prevea system.
So as you market this, you have to make that very clear to employees so they know that up front, not wasting Dana's time or their own coming in without it. At least they know they
that's an
can.
important piece of communication. I think you're right.
If that's all. Well, thank you very much for being
Yes,
here.
thank you for
Appreciate it.
coming.
Thank you.
And,
Back to the regular agenda.
Yes, then we go back to
Business and
The
finance.
regularly
Business as
scheduled
usual.
program.
Okay, have a presentation on cash flow, fund balance.
Two topics for this evening. Two topics for this evening, both related. Cash flow, talking about the money that we have on hand, expenses going out, revenues coming in. And then the second piece of that is fund balance as it relates to some of that money, which is a snapshot in time as of a reporting date, which for us is June 30th. Okay, so in front of you this evening, and I apologize, it's a fairly small font, wanted to fit it all in one page, have a numerical representation then as well as a graphing representation of our fund balance. So the number one, the reason that we're talking about this now is historically we've come by business offices come to you and asked for approval to short-term borrow money at this meeting. Informational now, voting on November 16th. Last year you approved $10 million short-term borrow. We got it towards the end of November. We repaid it in June. They incurred $47,000 of interest at a 0.79% interest rate, and everything was okay because at the end of June we got a big payment and we were good for the rest of the summer. Oddly enough, in the way cash flow kind of is this year, it looks a little bit different. But the second reason that we're coming is because at one, I believe it was the October 19th board meeting, these two topics did come up. What does our cash flow look like? This is what our cash flow looks like. And then the second piece is how does that fund balance play into the cash flow? Okay. So it's hard to talk about one and not the other because they do have a pretty tight relationship. So this year, as I'd mentioned, things are a little bit different. We did add about $5.8 million to fund balance for health insurance. We're self-insured. We've got a designated amount of our $40 million. Excuse me, let me get the right number. Of our 45, almost $46 million of fund balance, about $15 million of that is because we're self-insured. It is admittedly a little bit too high. We've spoken in the past about doing a health holiday. The budget reflects that, where literally we would not be collecting premiums. We could potentially use a little bit of that health insurance, self-insurance fund balance this year. In addition to that, earlier this evening, you did approve a $3.8 million deficit budget, where if we do expense all the money that is budgeted and we receipt all of the money that we've budgeted coming in, we could potentially spend $3.8 million of fund balance. But as it looks this year, things are just a little bit different. As I mentioned, we added fund balance towards health insurance this last year, and that's why November, the shortest month of the year, and yet in the calendar year, looks a little bit different. But we don't need money in November. We don't believe we do. We're keeping track of it pretty tight. I'd hate to think that we're off a little bit. We'd have to be off about $4 or $5 million in coming to, but I don't believe that that's going to happen. However, at the tail end of the fiscal year in May and June, that looks a little bit different. The way that money comes in is a little bit different this year. There's been some further delays where we're not going to be receiving money until the latter part of June. And as well, we do have cash flow a little bit because of those holidays that we spoke about, the health holiday, that could potentially be a swing of $6 million of use of fund balance. Up to, I don't know, I'm preparing for the worst case scenario on that, but we might need money in June as well as May. We're going to need money in June for sure, possibly, probably in May. So at this point, I'm not asking for approval on short-term borrowing. What I'd like to present to you is coming to you in January, potentially February, with a different scenario. The scenario I was prepared to come to you this evening was, let's look at a line of credit. We have to pay a fee, we get access to the money, but we're only paying an interest rate when we actually take money out of that account. Okay? But I think we can do that for this short period of time, and there might even be something even more cost effective than that as we approach that time period of needing that, probably for a few weeks. Literally a few weeks is all we need money.
You mean the time period in May, June?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's late May and early June. So,
Mr. Baca?
Yeah, thank you, Andy. This is very helpful, and I would like to make a suggestion that we send this chart along with a cover letter to our legislators and perhaps other elected officials in our school district, because occasionally we will hear comments that Green Bay School District is sitting on this big pot of money, $45 million, almost as if this exists as $45 million all the time, and that why shouldn't you use that money to pay for capital expenses or other projects, not realizing that this goes up and down. As a matter of fact, like you pointed out, we have a couple of negative ones. If we reduced our fund balance to say $10 or $20 million, we would be doing a lot of short-term borrowing, which is expensive, which I think sometimes people don't realize that the more you borrow, you got to pay interest on it, and then you pay it back. So I think this is very helpful for our general public, because I think a lot of them don't understand what a fund balance is, and the fact that there are only several times a year where we get money from our local property taxpayers and then the money we get from the state of Wisconsin. So I would like to suggest that we, along with a cover letter explaining our fund balance, that we send this to our legislators, because I think some of them don't understand or don't want to understand the problems of fund balance and the few times a year that we get money from our property taxpayers and from the state of Wisconsin.
I have no problem with your recommendation. I would ask, though, would it be advisable to add to that letter what it has cost the taxpayers for vouchers this year?
Certainly, I would have no problem with,
I didn't think you would.
with that.
Well, I think they need to know that. I don't know whether they pay attention. If they do stuff, then they wash their hands and move. Superintendent?
Mr. Sarno, when you think about the bond rating and our borrowing, short-term borrowing, do you have any sense of how low we could go in the fund balance before the rating shifts? I know that the better the fund rating, and you can put the right, I'm not sure I'm using the right words.
Bond rating.
The bond rating, the less interest we end up paying in the short-term borrowing, because we're borrowing less and we have a higher rating. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's fair to be able to calculate that. We'd have
Yeah.
to take a look at some scenarios.
I mean, you become at some point, having been in other districts and working with different fund balances, I know that as the fund balance goes down, the costs go up to the taxpayers.
Costs go
because
up, the bond ratings go down.
The bond ratings go down.
Yeah.
It's not a good scenario to be in, and you don't wanna be in a position where it's costing the taxpayers more and more and more, because you end up getting those, more and more of those bars below the line. You know, it costs a lot every time you go out to short-term borrow.
Yeah, correct. So our board policy states a fund balance of 15%. And the reason that that's one of those, and again, specifics, I don't know. I can inquire with Baird, who we use for our financial consultants, but 15% is pretty close to where that will then start affecting our bond rating, where we would not be rated as a AA1. At that point, then, we would be incurring more in interest, not just short-term, but also the expenses related to short-term, and then any future debt issuances. And I think I even included something here. You know, if we take out this health insurance, and all by itself, we'd be sitting at 12.2%. That $14.8 million that's sitting there. We need to, because we're self-insured, and I don't see that changing here. So you can't include it in your fund balance, but just assume, because that is for health insurance, we can't use that for everything else. I did a calculation. If we ended up nothing affecting the holiday premium on holiday premium, excuse me, but utilizing that $3.8 million of deficit this year, we'd still be sitting at 16.5%. So I'm okay with that. Gives us then, as we start the budget process very shortly, very soon, we'll be able to then address next year's budget and present a healthy budget for your consideration at that point. But yeah, I think there are some considerations. On the flip side, maybe not the flip side, but a different perspective, I've also seen board language that says fund balance enough to not short-term borrow. Again, there's that expenditure that we have when we short-term borrow. Let's put that $57,000 or $52,000 towards some literacy interventions or some other things like that that might affect our student outcomes. But then again, to do that, you have to have enough, and what it looks like on paper is we need another $15 million in there. That's just not feasible at this point.
But you're right, if we have a lower bond rating, let's say in a year or two, we have a referendum and we have to borrow $15, $20, $25 million, we will pay more for those bonds if we have a poorer bond rating.
Correct. Yep.
But how much realistically, and I'm not advocating for going more into fund balance than is in the current budget. I voted to adopt the budget.
Yep.
We're not talking about it going up a percentage point because you went down one tick, right? We're talking fractional percents.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it certainly isn't a whole percent if you're still in the high tiers, right? Do we have a higher tier than the state of Wisconsin itself?
A higher tier,
a higher
fund balance?
credit bond rating?
I'd say we're on the higher end. I know that there's only about 8 districts that have a better rating than us, which is only one rating above us. So we're pretty well on average. I'd say districts that have a low fund balance, that have high outstanding debt, post-employment benefits and some other things like that are high factors, we don't have, which is a nice sign. But I don't know how much it would.
But I mean, you don't have we don't have these 8 districts with higher ratings. They aren't paying 0% while we're paying
no.
2. I mean, these would be.
I'd like to look into it and give you an answer if I can. Yeah.
The other thing, just going to what you said, that I think is really important too, is that, you know, to save $60,000 in interest and borrowing expenses, we're talking about $15 million that would have to just sit there mostly untouched most of the time.
Yes.
And that's a huge, you know, I'm always going to say something about it when it comes up, because this short-term borrowing is a tiny cost and what we would need to offset it and prevent it would be an enormous sacrifice of program. That said, I'm okay with the balance the way it is now. One question I have is so let's say a day came where, and I'll just use non-technical terms, we needed to pay the bills, and because of the state's delayed payments, there wasn't enough in checkbook A, but there was still money in the health insurance. Since we're self-insured, can't we just write one
Yes.
check?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's just cash in the bank. That's what our cash flow is. And yes, any money that was coming from that fund balance, which is not money in the bank, but it is,
Right.
that can't, absolutely, yep.
Now,
So that's why
it's
that.
possible if
yeah.
you got hit with some huge medical expenses, that might push you over that edge into short-term borrowing, but they can work together.
Yep,
Okay.
correct, yep. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Yep.
Any other questions? One comment, if I may. Our senior members here might correct me if I'm wrong on this. I believe that our auditors recommended a 20% fund balance, and we thought that was just way too high.
I thought 20,
Yeah.
yeah, 20%.
So that's
Yep.
where the 15 came from.
But what do we, don't we have,
Got 18 right now.
I was gonna say 18 or 19, yep. Yep.
And you're talking about looking into getting a credit line. I guess, should you bring that forward later, I would have to see where that's a cost saving for the district.
Correct.
And/or other reasons to do it. And then I would want to know, are you locked into a rate when you enter agreements like that?
Correct.
That's sort of information I would want to know. And I think that would be it with this, and then thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to information for us on rebranding. And I'm not sure who's presenting that.
Lori's gonna come up.
I feel like I'm heading out to Wyoming.
Oh, my goodness.
So good evening. I shared with you some information in the board report, so I just have a quick presentation to just kind of recap sort of what I shared with you already. So what we did was we contracted with Henjum Creative. These are some of the logos that he's designed in Wisconsin, and Otis Spunkmeyer is a national cookie manufacturer. Well recommended, lots of experience working with logos. He's been great to work with. He's a freelancer, so he was able to do this at a much more effective cost for us than if we had gone with like an agency. And so the assignment we gave him was not a new logo, but to refresh our logo, which is a much more difficult task than saying start from scratch. So why are we bringing this to you? Well, one, times have changed. Our logo was originally designed in 2003. Today we face a much different environment. School districts market much more heavily, are out there advertising, promoting their districts, whether it's open enrollment time, whether it's now with Wisconsin's Parent Choice Program. In addition, when our logo was designed, it wasn't uncommon to do a lot of things in two color. Printing has really changed. 4-color printing is really the norm these days. The cost is really nominal in the difference between the two. And even like this weekend, this came in my mail. This is from Notre Dame Academy. You know, it's 4-color print. Visibility. One of the things we've recognized as we've been doing more and more with other organizations is that our logo just tends to fade away compared to some of the other logos. So when we did this Bridges banner that was for our press conference, again, we just found that our logo just doesn't stick out amongst the other logos. And finally, building on momentum. Since I've been here, what I've just really have felt strongly is that there's a lot of things, a lot of exciting things happening in the district, whether it's our fine arts, our 4K program at the Wildlife Sanctuary, the IB program at West, Baylink Manufacturing, opening up with Minoka Hill last year, the Da Vinci program, both Phase 1 and Phase 2 that we had this fall, working with the Culinary Arts program and the opportunity they had over at Lambeau this past spring. The fact that we're doing all of these things with reaching out to our communities, bringing on the new family engagement coordinators, our opening of City Stadium Automotive. You know, all of these things are really about a great momentum within our district, and the Bridges, the campaign that we had this spring, or just this fall as well. And so how do you create a way for the public to visibly become aware that things have really changed, that this is a district that has a lot of exciting opportunities for its students, and really want parents to come and take a look at the district. You know, we've been winning awards. That's also very exciting for the work that we've been doing. And so again, what we're recommending is a refresh, and this is not a new concept. We've seen other logos have done this. Recently, Google refreshed their logo and has a new design to it. UPS did it a few years ago. So what we are asking you to look at is the considerations we had was to maintain the integrity of the existing logo, but to visually represent an exciting, diverse, and vibrant school district. To have a slow rollout process to minimize costs. So the idea is more of a replacement model versus everything new at one time, such as we did in 2003 when we went from the blue bug to the tree. Something that incorporated a pathway, because we talk about pathways a lot within our conversations around the district. Brighter colors, this was really important as we wanted something that would create more appealing marketing materials, and especially as we look at our website redesign. And something that would be visible when displayed with other partner logos. And so I'm really excited to present to you what we've come up with. We think it's really an exciting new change. I'll click it on the screen as well. And so this just shows the various ways in which we would use the logo, so vertical, horizontal, black and white, and a reverse out of the logo as well. And I think when we look at the old version to the new version, I think it really demonstrates, you know, a much flatter logo to one that's has a lot of exciting colors, really demonstrates diversity within the leaves, from the color choices to the leaf types. It has movement to it, which we think is really exciting. And so some of the ways it would look in use would be stationary. We would continue with the black and white business cards that we currently use. Truck graphics, again, we would be looking at, as we replaced vans, putting in new graphics. And again, we talked about visibility, so that same banner with the new logo, our logo would look more like that versus sort of fading away with the black and olive green colors. And so, so I guess my question for all of you then is, do you feel like, based on the considerations we've put forward, is this something that we feel would be an acceptable move to go to?
Before anybody answers that, can you go back one slide?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And just hold that for a minute. I just want to see how it looks with everyone else's logo there and see what others think about that. Does it really stick out there?
Can you show the?
I'll go back to the old banner.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we watched a presentation that kept saying, "Where are we? We're not on there."
Yeah.
Sitting next to Mark, it was ABC, and I kept saying, "We have no color, we have no."
Where it says your tagline here, would
Yeah.
would that go by like East Fine Arts or?
Nope, so
like,
that is,
you'd
so basically
tailor-
we got to the point where we got this far with it. Well, we really didn't have some good options yet to really provide as far as something that I think we felt a big consensus on. So it might be we continue with All Learning, All Growing. We have some other options that we're still
Something said
continuing
on a path to greatness or something.
Yeah, that was the one that the graphic designer
We
put
all went-
forward.
Yeah, no, I was
Okay, I
getting
was wondering
concerned
about
about that,
that.
like, where'd that
Okay.
come from?
Okay.
Yep, so he had that on the
We all
stationery,
went.
but for the presentation today, I asked him to just put
And we
your
said it was
tagline
just
here,
given to the
so.
board, they could
Yeah.
figure it out.
Okay.
So you
Well-
wouldn't adapt that for the program, we would come up with what the common tagline for all of our.
Right, right,
wherever
so
we
that's
use
still
it?
something that would need to be resolved.
Okay.
Yes.
I notice all the high school colors are represented other than East High School.
And the problem?
Yeah.
There's actually not a purple in there.
There's no purple.
No,
Yeah, that's
there's no
Blue,
purple.
it's the
That's
same.
blue, not purple. Well, I'm glad to see, I didn't know this until about a year ago, but there was some concern over the
children in the trees.
Yes, I've heard that concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad there's no more children in the trees or people in the trees.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I have to tell you though, I'm not sure that different leaves doesn't speak diversity to me, but that's, I think, in many ways neither here nor there. I don't, I mean, I agree with you, it has more dimension, it has more movement. And and so this is also gonna stay?
That would stay,
Yeah,
yes.
I like that too, right.
Yeah. It's a different font, if you notice, there's a serif font we currently use. It's a sans serif font. I like it because I feel like it sort of continues the idea of the swooping pathway. So I like that idea.
So why those colors?
Well, so you're sort of limited, right, in your color choices. And so it's either you're in the blues and greens, or you're in the reds, oranges, and yellows. And so you want to kind of try to stick with those primary type colors.
Okay.
And so, and actually, when I thought about it, when you really think about sort of the logos in our community, you have Bellin, you have Purveya, Northeast and NEW Manufacturing's a blue and a green. It's like a tealy blue and a green. The Chamber. There's a lot of logos within our community that are sort of in that color range. It's also, blue tends to be a color that tends to be visually appealing, especially when we look at web design and things like that. So I mean, really, it's otherwise if you're not in blues and greens, you're really in the
Reds and
yellows,
yellows.
oranges, and reds.
Okay, so then let me ask one more question. Why do we have to? So those other entities that have green and blue, why do we have to have green and blue? I mean, I get blue, but I don't know. Should we be different? What about the other school districts? What do they have?
So Howard Swamico is a blue and a white. De Pere's red. Denmark is purple and yellow. Pulaski is red.
Because they all have one high school, so they've got the high school colors.
Oh, I see.
And we have a larger.
What is West De Pere, Burgundy?
What did we?
Orange, oh,
So we have black with
So-
avocado green, but avocado green with appliances had its moment.
I had a Harvest Gold bathroom growing up, so there you go.
Time has passed.
I guess, I mean, I like the design, I do. I guess I'm not feeling the colors. It feels because of, I mean, in many ways, because I see all over town, right, these colors,
Actually,
and
can
I'm
you
like,
go back to the
know.
multiple one, please? 'Cause
I
you're right,
thought
the
it kind of
colors-
blended in with everything else.
Yeah.
It just didn't
If
really
you
stand
could-
out for
You
me.
want to go back to the
That
yeah,
banner,
the last banner.
but that shows us with the new colors.
With NeighborWorks and Habitat. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
See, that's, yeah.
I don't know, I mean,
Colors is habitat.
And when you look at it, the thing that stands out the most is that Redbird.
so now why can't we have all the 4 high school colors? So that would be essentially red, purple, yellow, and like
Green.
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 and blue.
green.
Neon green.
We could try it.
So why can't we have that?
Well, I'm not saying that you can't.
Okay.
I'm
I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for everybody else.
I think what I would say is that I feel like that we've worked with some, and I wish he could have been here tonight. Unfortunately, he had an illness and wasn't able to join me. But I feel like that in working with John, I mean, this is sort of what he put together, and we pushed back on several things. I mean, as far as colors, we've worked with a variety of colors. And I think that in the end, this was what we came up with that we liked the best. We liked this green, we liked the little bit of yellow in there, the little bit of teal in there. For me, what I like about having the variation of colors, and it's on the one, let's see if I can find it up here. So see the colors at the bottom there?
Right.
What I like about that too, having a multicolor logo such as this, is that as we look at the website design, we'll be able to use colors as a way to help people navigate through the site as well.
Sure.
So you'll have sort of prominent colors that are on your homepage, and as you get to a secondary level, we might use other colors, which will be nice as well, versus everything kind of having the same look and then sort of losing your place within the website.
That sounds great.
I'm still like, okay, so why can't I
Lori,
have
how
like all
difficult would it be
five?
to generate a couple different color
Yeah.
variations?
Well, we can definitely do that.
I mean, just to see, just to be able to compare and
We've
see.
tried.
Oh, have you?
Oh, we've looked at
I
lots
find
of colors.
Colors are very interesting. You know, you can see stuff that you really like in clothes, but then you put it on, it doesn't look good at all. Or you can see something that doesn't look that hot on a rack, but you put it on and it looks good. I mean, for me, the colors look crisp and clean, you know, but I would also, as my colleagues, would like to see some of the other things, what they look like. And,
Okay.
you know, part of it, when you want something that jumps out on a light background, or even a dark background for that matter. So if that's possible.
Yeah, I think that I think the path and the, you know, to us it was, you know, the shape and design, and those are two bold things, you know, the bold student, which is different than the students in the trees. I'm assuming, and I wasn't.
So you think that's the student?
I think that's a student, and I think that's a student.
You think that's a student? What do you think, Zach? Do you think that's a student?
Like our district, and
Yeah.
like
And then
that's
each
who we
leaf
are,
is a
like, we're just like
student?
growing
The
tree.
students are the leaves, the diversity is the leaves.
See, and I'm looking at it
See,
thinking.
Zach and I get it.
The student is holding the world and everything, and opportunity is
I always thought it was
everywhere.
staff.
I think it's an adult.
I think it's an adult too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
for-
there you go. I wanted the kids.
So, I mean, I understand, I totally understand, you know, in terms of like congruity and, you know, that makes, especially when you put them all, like you would do in any kind of design, you put them all together.
So I guess my important question then is that one of the things we wanted to do again was not to differ too much from the, you know, to keep some of the integrity of the old logo.
Mhm.
So then part of the thing too is like, what do you put with green, you know, because like you're not gonna have red and green, you know, because they have Christmas. So my question would be just, do you want me, is it important to maintain the green? Because if it's not important to maintain the green, then we can come back with some other color options a little bit easier.
I don't think anyone's saying don't come back with this one, just
Yeah,
see some
right.
other
Color.
options.
But my question would be,
I-
is do you
I-
want to maintain the green? Do you want to keep the green, or is it okay if we try
for
choices
Green
without
Bay.
green?
I think
Green
it's, as a Green Bay School
Green
District,
Bay.
green.
That's,
Green.
green is
kind of
fine.
Critical.
Yep.
She's saying but if you're looking for serious, you know, other color options that would work from a designer standpoint, if we got rid of the green, it would put us on a whole new path of colors that might work. By leaving the green, we're kind of working with the colors that we have.
Right.
I think that's a question she's asking.
I see.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
if
and
you
that's
went
where I
to green
follow
and
though.
red,
I mean,
you know.
why is that I like this logo, but why is it a given that we can't include more colors? I mean,
No, that's-
Google has all of the
We
colors
could-
in their logo, for example.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like, you know, it just, I will go back and we will look at it.
Yeah, I think.
Coming up with some other colors.
Yeah, I don't think
just
anybody's trying
saying
to be
if-
argumentative about just,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
give some
we
other
were,
options.
we were
Yeah, no.
I
trying
mean,
to
I would
keep the
personally
integrity
argue
of
you
the green.
get into the reds and oranges and whatnot, you're looking like fall. And I would say, I would argue this looks more like spring, that we're springing forth and going forth, not fall is towards the end of things. But that's just my bias.
It's pretty
with it.
deep, Chris.
You know, I don't
But I
think we
like
have to beat a
fall.
dead horse here. Am I hearing that people are comfortable with the design,
shape.
not talk about colors?
I think the
concept.
logo is
Yeah.
fine. I'd just be curious to see it in a few
Yeah.
different color
Yeah.
We can do
options
that.
than you
Yeah.
probably have, but we'd like to.
I would ask when you do that too, I really like the slide you had with it on the side of a panel truck, because that's out there in our community all the time, so if you have other,
Oh.
when you work with other colors that you could have.
So if you could see something like this, that, what it would look like with other colors?
Yes, I would like that, because that, I mean,
Swoosh is the-
that's
Yeah.
out in the community all the time, all the
Pathway
color
is the
vehicles.
best.
You know, what it
No,
looks
I
like
like the
there is
pathway.
important,
Two lights.
because this thing has to look nice on panel trucks, it has to look nice
Does
on
that look like a
business cards,
Nike
it has
swoosh?
to look nice on stationery.
It's, no, we've had that conversation
No,
here, and
it
it's not,
doesn't.
because it's got,
It's
No,
a,
I don't think
it's,
so.
No? All right.
no.
no.
Ask the young people.
Are you gonna come to us with a couple of suggestions for our tagline?
Yes.
When are we gonna do that?
Well, I can bring those when I bring us the other colors.
Okay.
All right.
So like I said, we just hadn't had time to really, we had started working on it, we just didn't really have time to kind of cement it down to a couple options. And so I thought rather than Rather than put something we weren't all wed to, we thought I would just say your tagline here and we continue discussing it.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more thing, then I'm going to close this up because it's
Just
sort of
one
being
more
a dead
thing,
horse.
I just want to point out that there are smaller school districts in this state where the boards literally sit around and pick out the wall color, the carpeting
Yes.
color for all the buildings. So you just be thankful that you're not doing that with us, okay?
Are you gonna ask the students, so I think they wanna come.
Okay, fine, please. That didn't come out right.
This is the guy who always has to have the last word. Zach,
Yes,
go
So,
Zach.
there, yeah.
I think maybe the pathway is too dark of a green, in my opinion. Maybe that could be brighter, pop a little more. I like the leaves. I think the leaves are a good color. So I'm with you on that. But then when we had it in that big spiel with all the other logos,
Yes.
I think it almost seemed too wordy and it just kind of like, you just kind of got lost in it. So I don't know if maybe we could just do GB apps and do something like that.
We talked about that.
So that's, because the East of Pier, someone pointed out, you know, it's just the logo and that really pops out. If we could do just the tree and the path or something like that, that's my opinion.
Could we have an alternate for times when we need it to pop, when it's clustered, and then have it, you know, with Green Bay Area Public Schools for others, or do you not want to deal with
Isn't
too
the
many
logo like?
options?
Well, I think that once it
Yeah.
became, once just like our current tree becomes more recognizable, I mean, there's a lot of times we don't use the words with the tree because,
Oh, yeah.
you know, like, it's on our Twitter account, I mean, it's just a tree, we don't have, you know, who we are because people recognize the tree as being us, so I think it's just a matter of, once you build that, a little bit more recognition with it, you can have it stand alone.
Are we all set now?
No,
Are we-
Lily has a
one
point.
more, okay.
I am, like, with Miss Jeffries, like she said, like, we are, like, the high schools, I understand, like, the colors, and I understand that it can stay green, and it is green, so it goes to a nice, you know, clear, crisp green, and it's nice, but I think colors, like, I think it'd make a difference, I really do, but.
Anything else? Okay,
Good work.
Yes.
I'm gonna ask one more thing of you. When you come back to the table,
Okay.
have somebody there who knows design and colors. That can educate us, so we're not jumping around. Because if you've ever worked with an interior designer, they know colors, they can point stuff out to you that makes sense, that you may not see initially. Thank you.
And again, we had planned to have John here tonight, but he unfortunately couldn't make it.
Yeah, actually, he is. And you know, interior designers have like they're not exactly objective. Although I've never worked with one, so there you go.
Well, they're
Because we could.
they're very helpful.
Right.
That concludes all we have here.
All right, thank you, Dr. Wagner. We have a closed session, I'll read that, it's, actually goes to the second page, so. Special board meeting closed session has been scheduled for Monday, November 2nd, immediately following the adjournment of the work session meeting pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, personnel matters. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, more specifically to wit, potential contracts. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, more specifically to wit, negotiation of collective bargaining agreements. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, employee compensation. And pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation which it is or is likely to come involved, to wit, potential litigation matters. The meeting will begin in open session to consider the appropriate motion for a closed session so provided by law.
So moved.
Second?
Sandy?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Jeffrey?
Aye.
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. We'll move across the hall.
What's your tomorrow?